A very good morning to one and all. I am Aishwarya Devasthari, a project research associate at Maritime History Society. I would like to welcome you all to day 2 of our Naval Uprising academic seminar titled Naval Uprising 1946 Span and Significance, organized in collaboration with the Department of Civics and Politics, University of Mumbai. Before we formally begin, let me share a few house rules that shall ensure smooth proceedings and give you a better experience. Please use the comments box to drop your questions, observations, and comments. The moderator of the session in charge will collect the same from here. If you get disconnected from the session, you can join back using the link that you have received in your emails. Link for every session will be updated 15 minutes prior on the same seminar page. Now I would like to invite Commodore Shrikant Kesnu to moderate the panel discussion and introduce the panelists. Commodore Kesnu, an alumnus of the prestigious National Defense Academy, was commissioned in Indian Navy in July 1986. In his nearly 35-year career, he has had extensive experience in maritime operations, training, leadership, diplomacy, management, administration, mentoring, and communication. He has been the captain of two frontline ships, and in addition, his tours of duty have witnessed several important assignments, prestigious courses, and interesting tenures at sea, ashore, and abroad. He was also the defense advisor at High Commission of India in Nairobi, Kenya from October 2008 to March 2012 with Kenya, Tanzania, Seychelles, Eritrea, Somalia as his areas of responsibility. He has had a PhD from Mumbai University apart from 5 postgraduate degrees in science and social sciences. He has had been lead writer and chief editor of 9 books and many journals of Indian Navy. He has been involved with several academic, creative, and corporate outreach endeavors of the Navy. He is presently the director of Maritime Warfare Center, Mumbai, and in addition is also the officer in charge of Naval History Project. He has been conferred with Vishishta Seva Medal, VSM, in Republic Day Awards this year. The floor is yours, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Aishwarya. Thank you, Team MHS. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. After a wonderful and in many ways deeply invigorating session yesterday, or rather the multiple sessions yesterday, we look forward to day 2, where we begin with a panel discussion, which would be within this theme of the span and significance, specifically on the archiving and narration of the naval uprising of February 1946. Now, for this, I have with me two very, very eminent people with whom I will be conversing with. One of them is Pramod Kapoor, and another is Professor Deshpande, Anirudh Deshpande. I will quickly introduce them both and then sort of get into the talk straight away. Pramod is founder and publisher of Roli Books, which was established in 1978. But more importantly, he is also an author. He has written a biography of Mahatma Gandhi titled Gandhi, an Illustrated Biography, published in February 2016, 5 years ago. I have read that, very, very interesting, and it brings the Mahatma to life in different ways, particularly good for those who might not have read or followed him. Then he is at the moment, interestingly, working on his book on the Royal Indian Navy uprising or mutiny of 1946, which he calls, or his tentative title is The Untold Story. So that is Pramod. In March 2016, he was conferred the highest civilian and military honor of France. Since I can't pronounce it in French, it is the English equivalent is Knight in the National Order of the Legion and Honor. So that's Pramod for you. Then you have Professor Anirudh. Professor Anirudh is a very, very renowned, eminent scholar. He's a teacher of modern history, early modern history in the Delhi University, Indian and European history in the Department of History there. He has authored many books, and interestingly, many of these are about the military or about power, the British Raj and Indian armed forces, the British military policy of India, colonial constraints and declining power, class power and consciousness in Indian cinema and television. So there is mass media aspects also, and two specifically to the naval uprising. He has written Hope and Despair, Mutiny, Rebellion and Death in India 1946, which was his MPhil thesis, and I hope to talk to him much more on that. Other than that, of course, he has written more than 70 academic papers, commentaries, reviews in a whole lot of academic and mainstream media, whether it is EPW, whether it's Journal of Imperial and Commonwealth History, Biblio, and of course in Hindustan Times, Telegraph, Tribune, Pioneer, and mainstream media. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've got two people. There is one who is going to give us a very academic sort of viewpoint in terms of the narration and archive. And there's Pramod, who brings in, as a part of his quest and his journeys, the popular view, without in any way sacrificing the rigor of research, the popular view and the imagination that the people had of these. Now, their own journey into archiving this and in terms of how they got into this is interesting. We have Professor Anirudh just join us. Professor Anirudh, if you can hear us,
Yeah,
can
I
you hear
can.
me, sir?
I can. I
Wonderful,
can.
wonderful. It's
Yeah.
this is what you'd call perfect timing. So I
I hope
have
you.
both.
I hope you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
Yes,
we can.
yes,
We
Okay.
can.
Professor.
So it's all set now. Finally. So
Yes.
It's all set. I have
yeah.
finished with the introduction of both of you. And just to give a bit of house rule, since we have about 40 minutes and allowing for 2 or 3 minutes to sum up in the end, I would request that I would like to ask about 3 or 4 questions to each of the panelists so as to have an interesting discussion. So therefore, your answers, you could sort of time it to about 4 or 5 minutes for each question, so that we are able to generate a lot of interesting ideas and chats today. So, Pramod, let me begin with you. As Professor Anirudh just nets in, I remember you mentioning that I mean, I want to first explore with your journey. You mentioning that you got into this book actually through your book on Gandhi. It is when you were researching the book on the Mahatma that you heard about the uprising or the mutiny, and that is what got you interested. So tell us a little bit of your personal journey when researching this book, and how did this book sort of happen to you, and what has been your journey there?
Well, first of all, thank you very much to MHS and Srikant, who's become very good friend, and I feel very honored to be sitting with Anirudh Deshpande, who has been a source of many information for me. So I feel very honored to be here. My, to be honest, before 2016 or 2015, really, I had not heard of the naval uprising. It was in the process of research on Mahatma Gandhi that I came across. But I did not give it the due importance at that time. So this was a chapter which was omitted in the book. And I think I carried that guilt with me. One, that it was such an important event in the history of independent India, and that how I could ignore it in that book. And also, here was Mahatma's role was a bit controversial. Controversial in the sense there are two separate, different kind of people will look at it differently. Mahatma couldn't compromise with non-violence, and the ratings would say that, look, we didn't know how to fight with charkha, we knew how to fight with guns, you know. So there was that is how I began, and I got sucked into it, really sucked into it. And the research took me to all over the world, especially UK, to Greenwich, to London, to Southampton, and so on. And I must say that the amount of the material that I found there was not to be, well, couldn't be found here. I'll give you many examples. I mean, one of them was our own newspaper, Free Press Journal, which was a nationalist newspaper at the time, and the issues from let's say the mutiny or uprising started on the 18th. From 19th onwards, there are no records of Free Press Journal here. I went to Free Press Journal owner's son, Karnani. He said, "Look, everything is yours. See whatever you do." I went through all the papers there. Then in Nehru Memorial and various other places where I thought a newspaper could be available, it was not available. Strangely, everything from 19 till the 25th was missing. And that was a big mystery. That's why only those particular days were missing. So I eventually found it in the Maritime Museum in Greenwich, and it was there. So there are things that if we do not keep our records well, they can lead to misleading or erroneous history. There are so many examples. I mean, we all know that everyone knows that it was B.C. Dutt who started the mutiny. Yes, he did, but there was another man with him who he mentions in the book called Deb. Now, Deb, nobody knows who Deb was until I got hold of the police archive papers, where Deb.
Pramod,
Yes.
save the Dev part. I'm coming to it. It's a
Okay.
very interesting part. I'll be asking you about Dev when I ask you the questions about the interesting characters.
Well,
But
if I may interrupt, there's
yeah,
just one thing I would say before,
yeah,
or unless you want to ask about it later. There's also the case of M.S. Khan, who was the president of the strike committee, and there's a very interesting story. I can narrate it later too. That's
yeah,
so.
yeah.
Please, please.
I will come specifically to a question of the interesting characters who make this little later, and particularly because you've done some work on them. But I think you flagged a couple of issues to begin with. One, a sense of guilt about having left out something and coming back for seeking a sort of closure in that, and more interestingly, at the utilitarian level, about the lack of archives or about what you found in Greenwich that you couldn't find in India. Now, let me go to Professor Anirudh because he's lived his life in a world of archives, so to say. Professor, you were the first person who did an original piece on the mutiny. It was your MPhil thesis. Until that time, when you wrote it in 1986, there was very little literature on it. And you, of course, mentioned that you wandered into it through the mention in Sumit Sarkar's book. But how was your journey? And particularly, if you can also slightly address the aspect of what you found in the archives. I'll come to the archives later. But let's begin with how was your journey and how did it all begin for you in the mid 80s, so to say?
Thank you very much, Shrikant, and Johnson for calling me to this excellent seminar, which I've been enjoying since yesterday. My submission as a historian is a very simple one. In 1986, after I had finished my MA, I was looking for a topic to pursue my MPhil on. And I had read about this mutiny. Of course, this mutiny used to feature in most textbooks of Indian history, which we had read since then, but we had not paid enough attention to these events of 1946. In fact, we as young scholars began to pay more attention to these events, especially in the light of the establishment of the subaltern school of Indian historiography, which actually really took off in the 1980s. So we were, some of us young scholars in those days were looking for topics on which we could do our MPhils, and we had always been very critical of the establishment, and we had been critical of the way the partition of the country had happened in 1946-47. And because we were looking for critical subaltern histories, I glanced upon this mutiny of 1946 and thought that it was a potential topic for an MPhil dissertation. But I began on a note of great disappointment because except two books which were available at that time, one was One was the one which was mentioned by Johnson yesterday, which was the Rinse Strike, compiled by Subrata Banerjee in 1954, which is basically an account narrated to him by a number of sailors who had actually taken part in the mutiny in 1946. And the other book which was available at that time was the book published by B.C. Dutt in 1971 called The Mutiny of the Innocents. So there were these two books to go by. And everybody used to think in those days that the archival sources for this particular event would be available in Bombay, because Bombay was one of the epicenters of the revolt. There were two most important centers of this naval uprising. One was Bombay and the other was Karachi. There were, of course, most Indian cities were involved, and students and workers actually demonstrated in favor of the naval ratings in many parts of the country. But the most important and the most dramatic events connected to the mutiny took place in Bombay and Karachi. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So, armed with this very preliminary knowledge about an event on which Indian historians had not, to which Indian historians had not paid too much attention in those days, I headed to the National Archives of India, where all young scholars used to be sent by our professors, who thought that all original and good histories would actually reside. So we went. I went to the National Archives of India, and as usual, like a debutant in the library, I began to look at the home political files. And I found some material in the home political files. I found some material in the fortnightly reports filed by the police. I also started coming across newspaper clippings from the Times of India and the Free Press Journal and the other newspapers which had reported, especially the Times of India actually carried very detailed reports about the rioting and what exactly was going on in Bombay from the 21st to the 23rd of February 1946. But I began to feel a little dejected, because the really hard archival evidence which I was looking for in the National Archives of India was not being presented to me. And after searching for documents for a number of days, one day I was sitting in the canteen when a young archival officer, young archivist, came to me and said that, he'd seen me becoming a little disappointed with my work, and he wanted to know what I was looking for. And I told him that that I was planning to write an MPhil dissertation on the mutiny of 1946, but I was not coming across anything substantial in the archives. And he is the one who told me that, in fact, they had put together an entire cache of documents, newspaper reports, and inquiry committee reports in a separate section of documents, separate file of documents called the Rin Mutiny Papers, which they had put together, I think, just a few years ago. And they got all the documents from Bombay and they put them together in this. Lots of files had been transferred from Bombay and various parts of the country. And they actually had created an entire selection of documents, entire cache. And he said, you should look at that. You're actually just looking at the home political files which usual researchers look at. So I immediately finished my cup of tea and rushed back into the archives and requisitioned the entire Rin Mutiny papers, and I got this entire huge cache of papers, and I was completely overjoyed. And then I worked for several weeks on these papers. And these papers contain basically, see, there are three kinds of documents in these papers. I still remember, I still have some recollection of those days. One is the Board of Inquiry reports of all the establishments involved in the mutiny, because the large number, practically, as my book mentions and as my thesis also mentions, almost the entire Navy revolted. Just a few establishments and ships did not revolt.
Professor Anirudh, can I sort of we could come to this in terms of what the archives contain, since this is about narration. I'll just go back and forth between you and Pramod on this important aspect of archives. Pramod, I think Professor brought out a very interesting aspect, that he came to it through the subaltern studies route at a particular time when scholars were looking critically at different aspects of history. You, on the other hand, approached it as a informed citizen, but as a layman probably, who, having done your work on the Mahatma, then came here. So I wanted to ask you both in sequence. I will have Professor Anirudh come in and continue where he had left off. But since you also talked of the archives at Greenwich, and in contrast to what was or was not there in India, can you just tell a little about your journey, the in getting the source material and archives? How easy or how difficult it was for you? And once you finish, I'll go back to let Professor Anirudh continue his journey of what the archives contained.
You see, one of the first thing is that lack of admiralty record, which I think is very important. India does not have admiralty record, which I think should have. That's my and in absence of that, of course, Professor Anirudh Deshpande's work at that time in 80s helped me a lot because suddenly I was presented with reams of papers, of. Of, of the Commission of Inquiry reports on each ship and each shore establishment, and there was so much so much material that I over researched it. I think I mentioned this to you many times that there was too much material. But this was a difficult book to write because they were just by now there are about 5 or 6 books. But of course there are lots of essays which have been published. But I wanted to go to the very primary sources, try and get the people who were involved. They were all in their 90s. That's when you introduced me to Admiral Avati, and I had a very good chat, lunch with him. And so there was I was trying to trace people who were involved so that we could get the oral history. Some worked very well. The others, I'm so sort of eager to tell you about M.S. Khan because I was told M.S. Khan, who was the president of the NS Naval Society, he migrated to Pakistan and became a big officer there. Now, with that premise, I read in his in the reports that he was from Daska. He came from a family of lawyers. He was a blue-eyed man, and so on and so forth. So I put all my resources in Pakistan, my friends, my people in media, and everywhere. People went to Daska, they couldn't find him. Then someone wrote to me that do you know that M.S. Khan was the naval chief of Pakistan, So then I started to look for him, and then I got to his daughter. She said, yes, my father's name he passed away a few months ago, but that's another M.S. Khan. That's not the same M.S. Khan. Mm. And on the internet, if you look at it, there's still that piece of paper. If you believe that, then most people will write that he became the naval chief. Similarly, there was in absence of good availability of records, even if they are available, as Professor Deshpande said, that he was told that it will be in a certain section until this individual came and told him, look, so there should be more accessibility to these things, so that becomes easier for scholars. And for me, this was the mode of research I took, because my book is more of a narrative. It's I entertain with my writing, whereas Dr. Deshpande educates. So that is, these are his what he does. We benefit from it. I benefit immensely from his work. So I think we ought to have a much better system of archiving. I'm sure Dr. Deshpande will agree with me, and make the material much more accessible. Whenever you tell me you are ready for Dev, I'll narrate that story.
Yeah, I'll come to it. We got to have much better system of archiving, says Pramod, as a popular narrator. Now, Professor, so I go back. You had a serendipitous discovery or meeting with the guy and who led you. But do you sort of agree with the broad assertion that Pramod is making, that for an event which MHS says is prominent for being ignored in its governing note to the seminar, do you agree it is so, or you merely feel that there are too many blind people, so we're not seeing enough of what is the documentary evidence already there? As a pioneer researcher in this field, what's your view on this, sir?
No, I would say that Pramod is actually understating the facts, because it's not only the case with this particular event or other events which any young historian might be interested in, but our sense of archiving has always been in a shambles, and we frankly speaking, as a people, we don't know how to keep records. And since we don't know how to keep records, we have no historical sense, and we don't know how to actually make these records accessible to people. You can see the difference. I mean, if you go and work in a, I'm not saying that we don't have good archivists here. All I'm trying to say is that the way our organizations function, they are extremely clerical and extremely bureaucratic in their approach. There is great dissonance between the researcher and the scholar, who goes to these organizations, these institutions, with a certain purpose in mind, because all history is written with a certain purpose in mind, even if it is written for entertainment. Even there, the historian must ask himself, why is he writing to entertain people, or why is he not writing? Why is he writing about something, or why is he not writing about something? These are extremely, I mean, deeply felt philosophical and political questions. But in general, in general also, I mean, not only about the naval mutiny, but in general, our libraries are neglected. Our archives are neglected. There is never enough funding for these places. Much training needs to be done. The entire attitude towards keeping records and the entire attitude towards allowing researchers easy access to these records have to change. The whole process. I mean, I remember even now I'm told that you need special passes to get into these places and so on. I would like to share something with you. From the National Archives, where I found all these records, the Board of Inquiry committees, the Commission of Inquiry, and then, of course, those huge letters written by large numbers of quite repetitive sort of letters written by ratings who could not appear personally in front of the Commission of Inquiry, but who wrote letters to the Commission of Inquiry. And most of these letters were handwritten letters in which they expressed their feelings. They express their anger against racial discrimination and the lack of opportunities for promotion and bad food, and the fact that while the British had access to women and they would get their girlfriends onto the ships, the Indians were not allowed to do all those. There were sexual frustrations, and all sorts of frustrations were being felt by these young hormone charged ratings aboard the ships of the Royal Indian Navy. So all those things are there in those papers, which I use for my MPhil.
Wow.
But
Wow.
there's another place where I found a certain amount of material for this, and that place is the Historical Division of the Ministry of Defense in Delhi, in R.K. Puram, where I went to do my work during my PhD, which was on the Indian Armed Forces and British military policy in general between the late 19th century and the middle of the 20th century, which came out as a book by Manohar later on in 2005, which is called The British Military Policy in India, Colonial Constraints and Declining Power. There are, there's in 1955, in the 1950s, a joint collaborative effort was made by the government of India and the government of Pakistan to produce what is called the official history of the Second World War. And this official history of the Second World War was edited by a very eminent historian, Bisheshwar Prasad, and his colleagues. And there are several volumes about various services, Indian services, which had participated in the Second World War. And one of the services covered in great detail was the Royal Indian Navy. So it was written by a British officer, and this was incorporated as part of the official history of the Indian Armed Forces in the Second World War. And you have this, in a magnificent, a splendid, detailed account of the organization and manpower, recruitment, the beginnings of the service, the end of service, and that volume is there as part of the. I forget the name of the English officer who wrote this volume for Prasad's. Compendium of the official history of the Indian Armed Forces, which I think is indispensable. Indispensable. Yes, Lieutenant Collins. Somebody tells me
Collins.
that's absolutely right. So it is this kind of this kind of work is indispensable to write any modern history of the Indian Armed Forces, their social history or organization history or history of their institutions and so on and so forth. So it was, it was a very interesting journey, and I came across all these documents, which made me write the first MPhil dissertation on
On the
on the naval mutiny in 1987-88. So that's how
wonderful.
I became interested in these things, and from there I gravitated towards 18th century military history and other various topics, allied to these aspects of Indian history, which were considered very old-fashioned in those days. But of course, in the 1980s and 90s, the new Indian military history group was formed, and lots of young and exciting scholars began to work on them. And military history became cultural history, social history, political history, history of the state, history of society, history of propaganda, history of media, history of the subaltern. So it became completely integrated into a very new way of looking at Indian
True,
history.
true,
So you
true.
have various scholars, and
So
I'm
what
happy to be in their company actually.
Lovely, sir. So actually, this takes me very beautifully transition to the second aspect. We finished the archiving, and now we'll go to the narration aspect of the mutiny, the rebellion, the uprising. Now, Pramod, you talk of you being a storyteller, and of course, one of those important characters in those is Deb, of course, and I'm waiting to hear about him from you. But let me frame it in a larger sense. You must tell the story of Deb, but when we talk of it being a leaderless uprising, true, but there were lots of wonderful colorful characters. Khan was one, Madan Singh was one, and if I remember right, today there's an article in the Tribune about Madan Singh, and probably his daughter is listening in to this program. Madan Singh, in the capture of the Butcher Island ammunition depot, or in terms of spreading the message, a very, very wonderful person. That, of course. So, and you bring out that even Godfrey was a king. They were all interesting characters. Now, interestingly, many of them had a sort of mass media connection. Dutt's book ultimately got written by Sham Benegal. Godfrey and the inspiration for M. Madan Singh and Dutt both followed some careers in journalism. And then Deb, of course, who was a journalism correct. Now, despite all that, my bigger question, in which you can tell the story of Deb, is why has there been no great movie, some fantastic sort of documentary series? I mean, this is a story that is so rich in terms of what it can do in terms of a Netflix series, for example, or a grand movie with canvas with interesting characters. Why has that not happened? And can your book fill in that sort of vacuum there?
Well, it started to sneak in there, so I don't know whether it will fill in. But yes, there is a fair amount of interest, and of course, the Netflix wasn't there when the story was being written. But yes, there is a considerable interest in my book on converting it into film. But I'd like to go back to what the Deshpande, that how the and if it will just be a minute, comparing the archival bureaucracy and the staff in India versus London, or let's say UK. If you go with a question, they actually spend half a day telling you where it is and bring stuff to you in London, whereas here that culture hasn't set in. And I hope I'm sure it will set in terms of time. I suppose at the time of independence, we were too busy with making, building of a nation, etc. So this was not the priority, but that is why we are able to find Indian when, uh, when we go to the British Museum, for example, or we go to the British Museum in London, we find everything. We find everything. We find the British Museum, we find the British Museum, we find the British Museum in London, we find everything. the India. Now, having said that, let me tell you, you mentioned Admiral Godfrey. I mean, it's such an interesting character who was, worked with Churchill, who was sent to America at that time to talk to. I mean, he played. All this I couldn't have found in Indian archives. Then there are letters written between Colville, the governor of Bombay, and Viceroy Weber. Saying things about the Indian leaders, which would have never come out if because they would have been removed from the Indian archives, and even if they were not removed, they were not accessible. Let's say, but there it's a rule of 30 years. So up to 30 years you can get anything. So you can have a look at those. The history gets distorted if you do not have access to these kind of the material. As you mentioned, Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond, was actually an assistant of Godfrey, and he made the character of M on Godfrey. I mean, it's such an interesting story to tell the world, and that is connected with RIN uprising. So similarly, I was impatient to tell you about Deb, because Deb and BC Dutt were great friends. Deb was a Punjabi from Lahore, and BC Dutt came from Burdwan. They both became very good friends, and together they painted the slogans "Quit India" and etc. and flattened the tire of Commander King, and all those things that happened before the 17th of February. It so happened that Dave came from a very influential family, so his older brother actually took him off from and made sure that he even if he becomes a deserter, he was taken away from Bombay and sent to Simla, where he started to run a restaurant for his family. Now, BC Dutt has mentioned him many times, my friend Dave, my friend, but nowhere everyone thinks that it was BC Dutt who started the mutiny. But no, BC Dutt himself says that it was Dave and me who started the whole thing. And who Dave is? Dave is the uncle of the India Today owner Arun Puri, and his name is Rishi Dutt Puri, and it was purely by accident in the police archive that I found him, and then I went to the family and I asked for more material. They said, look, he used to say all the time that he had a hand in the mutiny and that he was a freedom fighter, and we used to laugh at him because he was the youngest of the brothers, and everyone thought that he's not the person to perform. And so there are these kind of things that you keep reading and discovering when you do my kind of book. So
Yes, it's a wonderful discovery, and you so wish that India Today had probably covered, therefore, the uprising in its 75th year. I mean, Mr. Arun Puri has a very, very personal connection to it. But now, since Professor Anirudh, you also a scholar on media, you've written a book on television and cinema and depictions there. I wanted to take from what Pramod has said. This is event that saw several colorful characters, and in the popular imagination or narrative, I mean, I had my cousin from Pune. She tells me that her mother, my Masi, my Maushi, as a young person would talk about this Navikanche Ban, Kalishanche Ban, in terms of it being popular imagination. This has been spoken about. So, despite that, why do you think that in terms of mass media space, this has not featured adequately in any depiction other than some recent initiatives in the last, say, few years? It's not found a place. What are your views, sir? This might, I think Johnson is warning me, this might be the last question to the panelists. So your views on the narration in mass media.
They're simply not interested. I'll tell you. I mean, I'm going to. I'll just confide something in you. I mean, when my when my book came out, may I show my book?
Yes, sir.
This is the book which came out, right?
Yes.
This book, and see, this is the book, and at the end of this book, in my conclusion, I mean, this is the book which also it begins with the poem which Johnson narrated yesterday, which he
Beautiful man.
Sahil Ludhianvi's poem, "ये किसका लहू है कौन मरा", जो कौम का परचम लेके उठे वो शोक सिपाही गुंडे थे. And not only that, the sailors of the the sailors of the HMIS Kathiawar were also singing songs written by Josh Malihabadi. काम है मेरा तगय्युर, नाम है मेरा शबाब, मेरा नारा इनकलाब इनकलाब. ये सारी चीजें हैं. And in the towards the end of my book, I have mentioned, in fact, I have said that I really wonder why some good film director or good filmmaker has not taken note of this event, which can become a very good. It can actually translate itself into a very good docu-series or a film also. But when this book was published in 2016, and a friend of mine who is also an amateur historian who writes on military matters and who's written a book on Akbar, Manimukh Sharma, he wanted to do a feature on this book in the Times of India, but they didn't. I mean, they didn't allow him to do a feature on this book in the mainstream newspaper. So he had to do it via a blog. So they are simply not, nobody was interested. In short, I mean, it has to. I mean, it has to generate its own demand in the sense that a big event will have to be done, and this event will have to be advertised. A fair amount of networking will have to go into it. A few celebrities will have to be roped in. Only then will they, and a Twitter storm will have to take place around it. Only then will they pay attention to it. Otherwise, my personal my personal and very bitter experience with the Indian media is that it is simply not interested in serious history. Period. Full stop. And now
Okay.
matters have become worse because of various reasons which we can't discuss on this forum.
So, media not interested in history. I don't know how much time we have got. I probably had one more question, but in view of time constraints, I'll sort of use that to also make a few of my moderators' comments at the end. One of the question that I wanted
If
to
I may,
ask.
if I may just, if I may just,
Yes, yes,
if I may
Pramod.
just,
Yes,
budge-
Pramod.
there are two.
Yeah,
there
please.
There are two films. There are two films in the making. I mean,
Yeah.
at various stages. But as he said, that that is late. I mean, it's a story that should have been told decades ago. That's it.
So when Utpal Dutt wanted to tell this story through Kallol, they got his play banned and he was arrested in West Bengal by the Congress government.
Yeah.
I mean, you arrested him. You arrested a
Yeah.
fine artist who wrote a play about this, and whose play was, I mean, the play been allowed to be performed in various parts of the country, there would have been a much greater
Absolutely.
popular sensibility about these events.
Absolutely.
But the play was banned and he was also arrested. So,
No,
this happened way back in the 50s, 60s, when I was talking about, decades ago.
Yeah,
So much so for your media
But-
and your attention to
True.
these
So,
things.
Pramod, great.
Shrikant sir, I thought I'll just
his
mention
his house
you.
is still called Kallol. Utpal
Yeah,
Dutt's
yeah,
house
Johnson.
is
yeah.
still called Kallol.
Yeah, so I'm
Kallol.
saying we can
I'm a great
extend.
fan of Utpal Dutt, actually.
So, sir, if you could reserve time for your closing comments, we can extend to 10:50. So you could have the closing comments, and we don't want to miss your moderating comments. So just I thought you can go
Okay.
on to 1050. Thanks, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. Gentlemen, just to add to the very luminous exchange, very wonderful exchange. One of the questions that I had saved, but I will probably add it as a part of my remarks. One is that whenever there is a narration, as you're all aware, there is also a counter narration and a counter narrative, and it has often been suggested by various different quarters that that the counter narrative must also be taken into account about people who might have felt differently about this uprising of mutiny as it is. Now, I do not want to get into that. I'm not That's not my area of expertise. But I want to end with a sort of very interesting human interest story that harmonizes both these strands. And it is again in the persona of two people. One was Lieutenant Commander Krishnan, who was the commanding officer of something called HMS Shamsher, a ship, who, when he heard about this event and was aware, alive to the possibilities of what might happen, the ship was at sea. He contrived a signal through his signal communication officer to do a search and rescue mission hundreds of miles away from Bombay, so that the ship could go away and then come back later after the uprising had finished, and thereby kept his ship out, while at the same time speaking to the sailors and talking to them about, look, if you tear my heart, India is there in it, but maybe this is not the time we should be there. Now, the other interesting character is an officer called YN Singh. YN Singh is probably the rare Indian officer who was involved in the uprising. He was then, I understand, in Port Blair. And of course, after his retirement, he joined the Communist Party of India. The issue is not about what these gentlemen did then. One took his ship away, the other was involved in the uprising. But both these gentlemen, subsequently after independence, formed the plans part of the Indian Navy. That means these two gentlemen got together and prepared the blueprint for the Indian Navy. Krishnan subsequently distinguished himself as a great war hero in the 61 Goa liberation and 71 war as a CNC East. YN Singh was our first naval aviator, India's first helicopter pilot, the first man to land on the aircraft carrier, and distinguished himself as Indian naval aviation pioneer. So, in a sense, both these gentlemen, great patriots, great pioneers, great thinkers, whatever their views on the uprising, got together to build the Navy. So, can we see today's Indian Navy as a sort of harmonizing of these two trends of the past? Do events like this, commemorated by the MHS, and recent activities by the Indian Navy in forming this uprising memorial, in naming tugs after the heroes of the uprising, in honoring the uprising veterans, does all that signal some sort of harmonization of different trends that mark the uprising? And is today's commemoration a step in that regard? So I think these are things that we could look at for future research, including seeking questions and answers from people, naval officers who are involved in that, and what were their views. So thank you both, Professor Anirudh and Pramod. I think all such discussions leave us with the query, ye dil mange more. We want more. We want more out of both of you. We're looking to your academic and popular narratives, and Pramod, all the best for the book. Thank you, MHS, for giving this opportunity. And thanks a lot, ladies and gentlemen, for this wonderful hearing. I'm sure we look forward to the next session with as much anticipation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, I wish the session could go on, but yes, we are really short of time. And I'm very thankful to all our panelists for such an interesting session. I'm sure everyone must have enjoyed it, and we have a lot of interesting comments coming up on our social media platforms as well. So once again, thank you all. After a 15-minute short break, we gather for our next session, which is a thematic session 2, moderated by Assistant Professor Manasi Misar Tirodkar from Department of Civics and Politics, University of Mumbai. The links for the same are on our YouTube comment section, as well as they are updated on the seminar site as well. So see you after 15 minutes break. Thank you.